For more on the relations between China and Venezuela, I spoke to Matt Ferchen a little bit earlier, and he is a resident scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for Peace. I asked him whether social problems in Venezuela could actually pose problems for bilateral relations with China.
Well, for a long time, China has been concerned about the stability, economic, social, and political in Venezuela, and that even goes back to the time when former President Hugo Chavez was alive and healthy. And since he became ill and then died last year, that situation has become even more extreme in terms of all those sources of instability. And as that situation has deteriorated, China has become increasingly concerned. It has continued to provide sources of financing and investment, but it increasingly has done so with skepticism and wariness about where the things are going in Venezuela.
I see. Well, I read where the China Development Bank recently opened an office there in Caracas after having opened one in Rio de Janeiro. So that seems like they're putting down some pretty strong roots.
Well, I think that's right. The China Development Bank has done more than any other organization within the Chinese system to build up the financial and especially the oil relationship with China, with Venezuela through its loans for oil deals. But I wouldn't take this necessarily as a sign that the CDB is confident about the direction of things in Venezuela. In fact, it's probably the opposite. Putting an office there is an indication that the CDB wants to have even more of an eye on where its investments have gone, where they'll be going in the future. So I think it's not necessarily a source of strength or optimism, but instead a source of skepticism and worry.
Beijing has made a conscious decision not to interfere in any policy there, but of course, a lot of the problems Maduro inherited from President Chavez. Do you see Beijing going the other way actually on this policy?
Well, I think that China will never, in some overt sense, intervene politically in the policies and the politics of a place like Venezuela, but it will do more and more to keep a very close eye on the types of investments that it has, the loan deals, and it has to become more involved if it actually wants the oil relationship to develop. For instance, China has a number of major investments in the Orinoco heavy oil belt in Venezuela. In order to actually make those productive, China is going to have more of an impact on the ground, more eyes there, more people watching for how these investments can become fruitful. That's not intervention, but to the extent that these deals are going to be successful, China is going to have to be involved in the process of improving the situation on the ground, socially, economically, and maybe even politically in Venezuela.